Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Zach, with my co-host here, Anthony Rovardo. Today, we're going to talk about a couple receivers, maybe a couple players who should be on the trade deadline target list for the Giants this year. Of course, we're going to be sellers, right? This schedule upcoming is definitely a little bit troublesome. You got the Chargers, you have the Bucks, you have the Chiefs. We're going to lose the majority of these games. And I really hope that John Mara doesn't look at this roster and say, oh, the injuries are to blame. That's a reason for keeping Dave Gettleman any longer, or making excuses for whatever decisions that they are going to make that involve not firing the whole lot of them. But I will say this, they'll probably end up being sellers. Jabril Peppers has seen his defensive snaps decrease to 49% this year, where it was in the 80s last year. So that's a huge cut. At this point, might as well cash in and get some draft capital back to work with. So we're going to talk about that, what we think they might be able to get back for him, and two other players that we think could be on the list, maybe a few other honorable mentions that come up, Anthony, in terms of just trying to shed some dead weight at this point or some salary space so we have a little bit more flexibility. But we want to talk about a couple guys because they are probably realistic discussions to have at this point in time. Before we do so, Anthony, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing all right, but I do think it is a good discussion to have in terms of the trade deadline upcoming and the Giants being that the state that they're in, right? 1-5, horrible football team. Don't look like they're competing anytime soon. It's probably best to start planning for the future. The Giants have a lot of players that are pretty good, but they might be better off elsewhere, right? Change of scenery is very good for players sometimes. There's some players on the Giants that might benefit from a change of scenery, going elsewhere and also competing now rather than later, because the Giants, we're not competing right now. We are competing later. So we're going to have to look towards the future, acquire some extra draft capital. The Giants have a load of picks in next year's draft, but you can never have too many draft picks, man, because the draft at the end of the day is a crapshoot. And the more chances you take, the higher probability you have of hitting on one of those shots. So that's really the plan for the Giants, I believe. So if they are going to build through the draft like most good NFL teams do, it's probably time to shed some of these contracts and trade away some of these veterans that are wasting away on this roster. It's not going to compete anytime soon, so might as well give these guys an opportunity to go win something somewhere else while we prepare for our future.
Yeah, and at the same time, you also have to think about the idea that the Giants might have a new general manager by this time next year, way earlier, obviously, which then in that case, you'll want as much draft capital as possible. Some people might make the argument, let's just take the compensatory picks, go into 2023 with those picks. You don't get them for that upcoming season. You get them for the offseason after that. So it would be, if Evan Engram hit free agency, signed with a new team, the Giants get a fifth round compensatory pick, for example, they would get that pick in 2023, whereas they might want to just get that now. If you bring in a new general manager, you bring in new management, they're probably going to want as much capital to then maybe replace some foundational players, bring in some guys of their own. I think that's probably what the case will be. They'll want that draft capital now. They won't want to wait for it. And I think that's probably a huge benefit and probably a more attractive prospect, especially because the Giants, if they do move on from Dave Gettleman, they're going to have to go in and find some good quality candidates. And we'll do a video later on about some candidates that we think might fit. But for now, we're going to talk about what the draft capital means to them. And essentially, if you're a new GM, you're a prospective GM, you're like, I want to take this job, but they have no money. I'm going to go here. I'm not going to have the flexibility that I want. I at least have a shit ton of freaking draft capital to use. And I think that's the primary attractive aspect the Giants can at least promote when they're going to a GM saying, hey, whoever it might be, you're a top of the line, top of the barrel, cream of the crop level GM prospect. We want you, but we don't have much cap space, but we have a ton of draft picks. So you can go in, pick your guys. Draft space will open up after Daniel Jones's rookie deal ends. So you'll have a couple of years there to start building the foundation of your team behind a solid quarterback who we know can win, behind a good offensive line. You have the draft capital come in. You have a nice contract here where you can you can set the stage and then build off of that foundation that you've set in place. I think the draft capital offers a tremendous opportunity for them to do that. Now, the Giants have a couple of solid foundational pieces to work off of already. That you have like the Dexter Lawrences who are still on the rookie deal. You have the Andrew Thomas. You have your left tackle for the future. You have Azeez Ojulari. You have some good depth pieces. Problem is, there's a lot of lack of discipline and whatnot. And I think that individual hits don't make up for the mass wrongs and the mass poor allocation of money that Dave Gettleman and Kevin Abrams have curated the past couple of years. Ultimately, they just haven't done a good enough job as a whole with the whole team. They hit on Andrew Thomas. They hit on Kadarius Toney, a couple of individual players, but the whole team has to play well if they're going to win games. It can't just be individual guys. And I think that's where the flaw is, the mismanagement of money towards guys like Patrick Omame, who signed a 3-year, $50 million deal, didn't even make it through halfway of his first season. Guys like Jonathan Stewart, who literally was useless. Kyle Rudolph, who has been vastly underused and looks like as slow as a brick. There's guys like that. There's a lot of mismanagement. Afadio Denabo, who was guaranteed $1 million, and they cut him before he even made the team, or even used him at all. That's the poor allocation of money that good general managers do not mess up on. They do not make those mistakes. Now, that is where Dave Gettleman has made a ton of mistakes, and that is where we are tied up with a ton of dead cap. You have Nate Solder, who still is going to be here next year, because if you cut him, you accrue $4 million in dead money, whereas you pay him that same amount and you just keep him as insurance on the bench. He's going to be here for next year, and then he'll probably be gone after that. But just poor contract structures, man. They're really biting us in the butt right now. And over investments in the interior defensive line when we have no edge presence. That's another big one. Those third round picks for Dave Gettleman, absolute crapshoot. Lorenzo Carter, BJ Hill, all those guys, Ocean Exhibit useless, absolutely useless. You need to be spending first and second round picks on offensive linemen and defensive edge rushers every single year unless you need a quarterback. And the reality is the Giants spent half of them on running backs and receivers and position players, and it doesn't make any freaking sense to me. An interior defensive lineman doesn't make any freaking sense to me when they needed to build out some of the more important positions on their roster and they missed badly. That this is their job. They're supposed to be getting this stuff right, not us. So, and most of us are pointing out this fact. But we do want to jump into some players here. I want to start with Sterling Shepard. I want to start with a veteran here who ultimately has an out in his contract after this upcoming season, or rather this present season. So ultimately, this is how it would be. If he was cut after this season, it would be 3 years, $24.26 million, and it would be a 7.9 dead cap hit. So they would get hit with an $8 million cap hit in 2022. Whereas it would be 12.5 million next year. So you save a little bit of cash, or you save about 5 million, 4.5 million, and then you're clear to go in 2023. You have no dead cap hit. Whereas he would be getting a hit of 13.5 million, which is just astronomical for a player who's going to see his role decrease with Kadarius Toney making such a big impression anyway. I say trade him now, get that money off the books. I believe the dead cap hit would still hit. Maybe they can get rid of some or get some cash considerations or something back in return to balance it out. But end of the day, you want to get as much draft capital as possible, and he's a valuable player. Our season is pretty much over at this point. You might as well go out, maybe get a 4th round pick. For the money he's making, he's actually pretty productive, I think, on a good team. He would be an absolute stud for another team. If you get a 4th round pick for him, I'd be happy with that. Just to, you're basically paying $7 million or $8 million in dead cap for one hit for 1 year for a 4th round pick, for example. So you're paying for a draft selection. That's what good teams do. They pay for draft picks. And instead of just accruing that hit and then seeing his role diminish anyway, because you still have Galladay, Kadarius Toney, you still have a bunch of guys on the roster. You can always draft the guy in the mid rounds to go fill that slot role. I don't necessarily think he's irreplaceable by any means. Anyone that's not replaceable should be on the trade deadline idea right now, especially with the season and the crapshoot, Anthony. So when you're thinking about Sterling Shepard, do you think he's a guy that the Giants should be thinking about potentially parting ways with?
Yeah, I think the reason for Sterling Shepard being a trade candidate is because there's NFL teams actively looking to trade for wide receivers. That's the number one thing to me, right? I love Sterling Shepard, and I think that he was in line for a career year before that hamstring injury. I don't want to see him get traded at all. I actually want to see him stay with the Giants. I won't be happy if they trade him away unless they get very good compensation. But that's the thing, right? The Giants can get very good compensation for Sterling Shepard because he's a very good player. Contract is actually pretty manageable for another team to take on. And also, there's a lot of teams looking for wide receiver talent, and he is great wide receiver talent. So it does make sense for the Giants to move on from Sterling Shepard, especially considering that, they're getting younger at that position. They just spent a bunch of money on Kenny Galladay. They got Kadarius Toney. They still like Darius Slayton. John Ross seems like a pretty good player when he's healthy as well. So although that's always been a struggle for him, so I'm not sure how much the Giants can really rely on him long term. But for Sterling Shepard, dependable, shifty, underneath slot receiver, amazing player, really a great number 2 receiving option. He really is. But for the Giants, I just don't know if they have the need to keep him around for the long term, right? He's getting up there, he's starting to age, and he's getting more and more injured every year, it feels like. And the Giants do have an opportunity right now where the league is looking for wide receiver talent. And New York actually has a couple of players that they can offload in this situation. So whether we're talking about Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, John Ross, somebody is definitely a good trade option for one of these teams looking for a wide receiver. And obviously the most enticing of those three, or of any option on the Giants, is Sterling Shepard. So I wouldn't be surprised if this move happens. I wouldn't necessarily be happy about the move unless it was really good compensation. But like I said, with so many teams currently looking for wide receivers on the trade block, there's a pretty good chance that the Giants could get some decent compensation for Sterling Shepard.
Yeah, and at this point, you want to be, cashing in some of those guys who can at least offer you some sort of value for the future. And like I said before, it boils down to another general manager coming in and actually wanting to be the GM of this team. A prospective general manager could come here and say, you know what, you guys just freaking suck, man. You have no draft capital, you have no money. What am I supposed to do with this? You know what I mean? He'd be like, you know what, another team over here actually has a ton of draft capital and money to work with. I'm going to go over there. You know what I mean? They might just prefer another team. However, if you start collecting draft capital, and the Giants do have 2 first-round picks, so it's very, very attractive for a GM coming in saying, you know what, if I want my quarterback, I'll go get him. If I want that edge rusher, I'll trade up and get Kayvon Thibodeau. If I want to wait and get the USC pass rusher, I forget his name, and go after one of the better offensive linemen, I'll go do that and bolster the defense and offense at 2 key positions that the Dave Gettleman regimen refused to freaking address. Andrew Thomas was his first round offensive tackle he's ever, offensive lineman in general, he had ever taken, ever. And I have to imagine Joe Judge had some say in that. So credit to Joe Judge, because he came in and suddenly the Giants aren't like living in 1975 anymore. I will say this, by the way, little side note. I get the sense that Joe Judge is giving all he has, right? I feel like Joe Judge wants to win so bad. He wants to be a great head coach. I don't get the impression he's being a lackadaisical piece of trash. However, sometimes the way that Dave Gettleman speaks in his press conferences, like, I get the sense that he doesn't really like care. Like, he's just like taking a paycheck, or he doesn't really do much. And you know, I don't know if that's true. I'm just speaking out of my ass at that point. Like, I don't know if he actually is lazy in any sense of the word, but the way he speaks doesn't convince me that he's like altogether there and really present. Joe Judge, at least get the sense that he freaking wants to win, and he tries. So with that being said, a younger GM coming in here with a modernized approach, doesn't have to be a young GM, could be an old GM, but if they have a modernized approach with a lot of experience and no football, I want them to be a prospective option for the Giants. And ultimately, getting more draft capital from guys like Sterling Shepard would help us land a good GM. Now, the next player on the list, Jabril Peppers. Jabril Peppers, as I said before, has seen his snap count decrease to about 49% from the 80s last year. He has not made an impact. He's been really struggling in coverage. He got burnt by Cooper Kupp. Ask me why he was covering Cooper Kupp in the first place. I don't know. He has been really bad against tight ends, bad in coverage overall. His run stopping grades have been okay, average at best. He's just really not being used properly, or he's taken a step back and regressed. Maybe it's a scheme-related issue. I'm not entirely sure, but the Giants are getting Aaron Robinson back from IR after this Rams game, so he's coming back. I expect them to use him. He's kind of a bigger, physical, aggressive corner. I expect them to use him in the same role that they are right now with Jabril Peppers, except he's a better coverage player. So I think they're going to really roll with him a little bit more in those slot situations and whatnot, in those nickel situations, and then use Jabril Peppers as trade bait and trying to get some allocations from him, like a third, maybe probably not a third, maybe a 4th or 5th round pick. So Anthony, when you're looking at Jabril, do you think he's on the the trade line as well?
I do. It just makes sense because he's not playing that much. He was at one point a focal point in the Giants defense, but his role has diminished and decreased week after week. And at this point, he barely seems to be on the field at times. It's just like he's not even there. He's not making an impact. And sometimes the impact that he's making is the opposite of an impact, right? He's blowing plays like the Cooper Kupp one that you just referenced, Alex. So with Jabril Peppers, again, another player that I think had a lot of potential, a very good player. If you really look at last year's defensive scheme, we've talked about this a lot. The scheme has changed completely from last season. Last year's defensive scheme, you could not run that scheme without Jabril Peppers, right? That needed Jabril Peppers to run the way that it did. It was very important to have him on the field. That's why he played so much, and he really helped that defense kind of take it to the next level, playing that specific role, that money back role that he was playing last year. This year, they've changed the scheme, and now they don't have that need for Jabril Peppers to play that specific role because that specific role isn't a focal point in the defense anymore. So they changed the scheme. It used to fit to the player's strengths last year, and Jabril Peppers thrived in that previous scheme. But now with this new scheme, not everyone fits into it, and I guess Jabril Peppers seems to be the odd man out. So If they want to trade him, it would make sense. They could probably yield some decent compensation for Jabril Peppers, and I'm sure there would be a market for him because, again, he is a talented safety that fits a very specific role very well. The Giants just aren't utilizing him in that role anymore, but I guarantee you there's going to be another team around the league that runs a similar defense to what the Giants ran last year and says, that is a player we need to fit in this specific role on our team. So let's go ahead and make a trade for him.
Yeah, ultimately, I think at this point, this season's lost. You got to start cashing on some of these talents that you have that teams may see and be like, that's a valuable player that we can add. But guys, a quick shout out to our sponsor, BUSR, BUSR. Go to check out in the description. Sign up. They're literally matching any offer. Made a couple $100 this weekend on football. It was easy. They're also giving away $250. All you have to do is sign up for free. Just sign up for free, and literally they'll see the code. Just click on the link in the description on YouTube, and they will give you $250. One of you guys will win. It's like not that many people are signing up just yet. So you have a really good chance of winning $250. Just bet now. And if you want to be a part of a exclusive group with me, we can talk about bets and stuff like that on the side. Totally happy to do that. So really, if you want 250 free bucks, just go sign up. It's like the easiest thing in the world. I guarantee that you will not be disappointed. And we'll have some fun together, and we'll do some good stuff, and we'll make some bets and have some fun in an exclusive chat with myself and Anthony. So go do that. Hit the description up and go sign up. Exclusive sports book, super easy, and they're really great stuff. You can do player prop bets and everything. They have all the information you need as always. So guys, the last player we want to talk about is none other than Evan freaking Engram, Mr. Drop City, Mr. Drop Boy, Mr. Evan Interception. This is the guy we want to start talking about as a potential guy who should be on the way out. He has played 4 games this year. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if Eli Manning, that many. So basically, if you're looking at Evan Engram, he has had 1 game in those 4 contests where he's had over 30 receiving yards. That is not what you want to see for your Pro Bowl tight end, quotation marks, Pro Bowl tight end. He needs to go. He needs to go, and Caden Smith needs to replace his role tomorrow, yesterday, last year. You know what I mean? He's just not doing much at all. He's not worth it. If the Giants really feel like they're going to, they're not going to extend the guy for sure. He's not going to be extended. Why not trade him now and get some draft capital? The season is lost. The season is lost. Go out and trade the guy for a 4th or 5th round pick, compensatory nonsense for 2023. Get your GM all the picks. If you walk into the offseason with 2 first rounders, a couple second rounders, a couple third, a couple 4th rounders, you can redo half of your team with that, man. You can replace multiple positions, and you walk away from last year with Kadarius Toney and Azeez Ojulari, and Aaron, you have a couple of good players there on a foundation to build off of. A general manager can come in here and say, you know what, I got some valuable resources to work with now. Evan Engram is not doing anything to justify him being on the team any longer, Anthony. Do you think they should trade him? Because if you say yes, I might have to come over there and fly down to Florida and beat your ass.
Yeah, they should trade Evan Engram, dude. Absolutely, I think that they should trade him. I've been saying that for weeks, so I've been saying that since week 1 or 2. Actually, week 2, week 3, that's what it was, when we played the Falcons, and he was going onto the field, they're booing him. He was leaving the field, we're cheering, right? That just tells me that the fans are sick and tired of Evan Engram. They hate him, and that's never going to change at this point. No matter what he does, even if he catches nice passes like he did against the Saints, he doesn't even get any credit for that anymore. No one's like, oh, Evan Engram played really well in that game. We don't care. We all just hate Evan Engram at this point. And it's sad because he's a good person, but he is kind of a failure of a football player in many ways, right? Because he had such high expectations and he's failed to reach them. He's had a lot of drops, costly drops that have cost the Giants games. Giants fans really wanted to see him succeed. They were rooting for him really hard, and he's just been disappointing, utterly disappointing, and it sucks, but it just is what it is. That's the reality of the situation. I think that it's best for both parties, for the Giants, for Evan Engram to move on. He needs a new change of scenery. He needs a new environment to go into. He is a good, talented player, but it's not going to work here. It's just not going to succeed anytime soon in New York, okay? The fans don't even want to see him succeed at this point. We're all just over it. We're over Evan Engram. We don't want to watch him play. And so I just think it's best for the Giants, cut your losses, get some assets back for him, trade him, let him have a successful career elsewhere, because I guarantee you he will, all right? He's going to have success if he goes somewhere else. But for the Giants, at least just get something for him. Don't let him just wander off in free agency, go sign somebody, and then you don't even get a comp pick, right? Trade him before it's too late. It's the right thing to do. He doesn't need to be tied down by the New York Giants right now. We don't need to be tied down by him. It's best for both parties involved. It's kind of like one of those breakups where you end on good terms and you just go your separate paths. That's what the Giants need to do with Evan Engram, in my opinion, and I've had that opinion since the very beginning of this season. it's just time, man. And it sucks. Like I said, I really like Evan Engram. I think he's talented. I think he's going to have success wherever he goes. But for the Giants, it's the right decision to go ahead and get some draft picks for him.
I completely agree. And if there's any other players that should be traded, I mean, the ones off the top of my head, maybe James Bradberry. That's just saying because I'm trying to figure out ways to get cap off this team right now because we're tied up. Like a general manager is going to come in here and have no flexibility whatsoever. If we can get some money off the books, that would be ideal. Maybe Bradberry, and you have Adoree Jackson still, but you can draft a cornerback next year, maybe in the second round. Hope for the best there. I just the way he's performing this year, he's not performing up to par. Whether that's scheme related or not, I don't know. Do you think that maybe that they would think about a Bradberry situation where they may look to trade him? I don't think any team's going to take that contract right now based on how he's playing this year, but I'm not saying they should or they will. I'm just trying to think about players who may be worthy of exploring.
Yeah, the only way that I would see that happening is if the contract got reworked through the trade, and if the Giants had to eat a lot of the salary and a lot of the contract, which the Giants just simply can't afford to do. So I think we're locked in with James Bradberry, despite the fact that the Giants were actively shopping cornerbacks. Apparently, that was something that they were doing before Rodarius Williams got injured. They were looking at the cornerback market and seeing if they could offload any of their players. We theorized it might have been Darnay Holmes that they were looking to trade, but now they obviously can't with Rodarius Williams injured. But could have been James Bradberry. I'm not sure, but I am going to throw out one more name that the Giants could consider trading away. You guys might not like this one too much, but there is buzz around the league that teams are looking for defensive linemen. And the Giants do have a defensive lineman with a pretty expendable contract who's young and talented, and it is Dexter Lawrence. He has not exactly lived up to the hype, lived up to his potential this season. We were really expecting a big jump through, breakthrough year. Haven't seen it. He is a player that could potentially yield a pretty good draft pick, pretty good compensation, young, talented, real moldable piece of clay that a team might be very interested in and might make a good package offer for the Giants. So that's one last name that I'm going to throw out there, Dexter Lawrence. Again, like with most of these players, I don't want to see him go. I would really like the Giants to keep him. Hopefully they can turn things around and he can become a good player for the Giants. But I wouldn't be surprised if another team were to call up the Giants and say, hey, Dexter Lawrence, what's it take to get him on our squad?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair. He's another player that would get a pretty penny probably, considering he's still in his rookie contract and has a 5th-year option included in it. So if you guys have any other players who you think should be on the trade block, let us know in the YouTube comments. But Sterling Shepard, I mean, even Darius Slayton could be on the trade block for that matter. Getting back a 4th round, 5th rounder for him would probably be a pretty good haul considering he's a 5th rounder to begin with. If you're going to keep Sterling Shepard, one of those receivers has got to go. One of them has to be traded because we just don't need them all. And if they're all going to be injured anyway, who the hell cares? So, Sterling Shepard, Jabril Peppers, and Evan Engram. Those are the 3 guys who definitely should be on the trade block. But again, who knows? What's going to happen there, and we'll see if the Giants even make any moves at all. If they don't, I'd be very upset because ultimately this team is in shambles right now, and they really are in a corner. They're really pigeonholed themselves, and they got to be proactive moving forward, especially if they're going to get rid of Dave Gettleman. But guys, make sure to subscribe below, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Make sure to take advantage of that $250 free. Enter to win. Just sign up. They will know. Click on the link in the description. And if you put $100 or more in there, they will match your contributions. If you put $100 in there, they're going to give you $100 to play for free. It's like the most simple thing ever. It's really awesome. I've already used it. Great platform. So really enjoyed that as well. And I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll catch you guys on the next New York Giants video.